Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, July 12th at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is Advancement Live. I'm your host, Andrew Gossen. On today's episode, we're tackling a topic of perennial interest, days of giving. In the years since Columbia first showed the advancement world that short, intense online giving campaigns actually work in the higher ed space, days of giving have evolved to become increasingly central to fundraising strategies. They provide an unparalleled opportunity to make the case for support of your institution, drive participation, and get new donors into the pipeline. As we see more and more institutions trying out the Day of Giving model, we're beginning to appreciate just how much the model can vary in terms of scale and scope. In fact, I don't think it would be extreme at this point to say that any institution, regardless of size, can have a successful giving day as long as they are realistic about their bandwidth, their skill set, and their goal setting. On today's show, we're going to talk about best practices for days of giving, the fundamentals that you need to think about regardless of the scale and complexity of your plans. But before we dive in, let me say some quick words of thanks to our sponsors and then introduce today's guests. Advancement Live is part of the Higher Ed Live Network, offering viewers direct access to the best and brightest minds in education. Live broadcasts allow viewers to share knowledge and participate in discussions around the most important issues of the industry. All episodes of Advancement Live are free and accessible in the video archives at higheredlive.com and in podcast format on iTunes. Today's live broadcast is made possible by iModules. The Advancement Department of University of Virginia was able to raise $120,000 in 36 hours in celebration of their founding father's birthday. We just tweeted out a link to the video case study, so check it out. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. M. Stoner is offering a free webinar on visual design for digital stories on July 20th. Do you know how strong visual design supports storytelling? In this webinar, M. Stoner will explore principles for creating visual interfaces that encourage reading, exploration, and interaction. Registration is free, and we are tweeting out a link shortly where you can sign up. And with that, let me turn to welcoming today's guests. We have three people who have been through Giving Days themselves, so we've got some veteran experience here for your viewing and listening enjoyment. First up, we have Bill Knapp. Bill is the Director of Annual Giving at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. Prior to joining the team at Trinity, Bill spent over 6 years at Rosemary Hall running development operations and the boarding school's annual fund program. Bill is joined by Mirko Wiedenhorn. Mirko is Senior Account Manager and Client Consultant at iModules Software. Prior to joining iModules, Mirko worked at Wilkes University as the Director of Alumni Relations and Annual Giving. At iModules, Mirko consults with clients to help them to meet their strategic goals with Encompass, increasing constituent engagement, and sharing best practices for advancement. Finally, our third guest today is Zoe Zweigett. Zoe joins us from the College of Worcester in Ohio. She became Assistant Director of Annual Giving Young Alumni soon after her May 2014 graduation from the college. At Worcester, she oversees Young Alumni Giving, student philanthropy, and annual gifts to athletics. Zoe was instrumental in helping lead Worcester's Giving Woo Day in early December, as well as a successful Young Alumni Giving Challenge during March called March Fladness, which is a title that I adore and I wish I had thought of myself. Bill, Mirko, Zoe, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So to start with, let's talk a little bit about getting ready for a giving day. If you've made the decision that you're going to explore this, or you've decided that you're going to do it after a successful first or second attempt, how long would you say that it takes to effectively plan a giving day? Let's start with Mirko with this one, if we may.
Sure, so I think it depends on a couple of elements. So the first thing is this your first giving day, or have you done a giving day for a number of times? The first one is going to take generally more time to plan because you don't have the processes and procedures in place. But I would say minimally 3 to 4 months. I think most of the schools that I've seen run giving days are looking more at a 6-month calendar in terms of starting the planning process.
Bill, how long did it take you your first time out with a giving day?
Well, we did visit Columbia, and that was in December, and then we started planning in December and really got into it in January. So I would say it took about 3 months to get the first one off the ground. The subsequent ones actually took a little bit longer because we were queuing up our volunteers in the fall each year.
And Zoe, how about you?
About the same. Our first one, it took about 2 months, and then once we started doing more and we realized we wanted to add campus partners and matching gifts, that it became more between 4 and 6 months of planning to really make sure that we were getting the best challenge and we had the best advertising.
That actually rings true with my own experience here at Cornell. The first time we did it, we were probably 3 months, and I've got to say that felt an awful lot like a 3-month fire drill. Second time around, it took us 6 months, and that was much more relaxed and deliberate. And I certainly endorse taking more time rather than trying to do it too rapidly. Zoe, I'd like to go to you next with a follow-up question. You mentioned campus partners, and this is something that Bill, I believe you alluded to as well in terms of bringing volunteers on board. Who needs to be at the table to plan an effective giving day?
Yes, so really you need everyone from your department on board, including for us, our alumni relations team is separate than our annual giving team. So working with them on student engagement, maybe recruiting some of their volunteers. We have an online ambassador program that pushes out different information on social media. We tap into them for our giving days in addition to our class agents and our reunion volunteers. But then on campus, it really is a matter of making sure that student life is on board if you want to do more with your actual students. And we also pulled a lot of faculty and staff in as well, and that just took different people from our department, but also the campus being open to what we had to say.
How much work did you have to do getting them to wrap their heads around what a giving day is and what roles you need them to play for you?
It took a few meetings just to make sure that members of cabinet were on board and that they knew that this was happening in advance. We sent some email communication out as well so that they weren't surprised when members of our development alumni relations team showed up at their doors or were across campus on that day, really rallying support.
Thanks. Bill, how did this work out at Trinity? Who was at the table when you started planning your first giving day experience?
Well, again, definitely everybody in the advancement office, but you know, we also queued up our presidents to be you know, presence on giving day, and you know, our communications department was really instrumental in dealing with all the various aspects of you know, how we were going to put that out there in the media in various forms, and of course the volunteers and you know, our National Alumni Association and our class agents and other volunteers. We queued in pretty early on all these.
So Mirko, does this ring fairly true with your experience across the various different clients you work with who've been working on these sorts of campaigns?
I would say so, definitely. I think from the vendor perspective, it's very important that you have key people at the table early, like Zoe and Bill have said. Marketing communications is a key part of that. When you're thinking about building out your giving day site and your communication strategy, and then Zoe touched on alumni and annual fund, as well as I would say the major gift team as well. Even if you may not be looking at setting up some donor challenges in the first iteration, I think just having them on board is incredibly important. And then there's so much opportunity to involve other partners on campus, groups that you may not traditionally work with, which I think what I've seen is it really helps spread the word about what advancement is trying to achieve on campus.
Totally agree with that, and I'd just like to underscore the importance of making sure key partners from advancement services are on board. We found that with our colleagues in gift processing especially, this is a tremendous additional burden on them, and anything you can do to set the stage for it to be an easy process for them, as opposed to a process where they're having to deal with 1,500 sort of unique, individual, weird cases that they actually have to track down manually, that saves you all sorts of time as an organization in the end. But my experience is certainly that Giving Day takes a village, and that you're far better off casting the net widely to start with and being inclusive instead of giving yourself a headache by not having the right people at the table early on in the process. So let's pivot now and talk a little bit about structure. And to address this, I'd like to start first with Bill and then go to Zoe if we can, and then back to Mirko. Bill, could you tell us a little bit about how you conceptualized your Giving Day at Trinity? What did it look like? How did you think about the goals? How did you think about how you were going to be presenting this to your audience?
Well, Giving Day is a great reason to do storytelling. And our first Giving Day, we built around the student experience, and the second one we built around the faculty and teaching and learning. So those were really important driving points and really helped frame what we were going to do. In terms of the goal for your first Giving Day, it's really hard to figure what your goal is going to be. We had a goal of 600 donors as a sort of a safe goal, and then 900 donors as our stretch goal. And we blew through both of those goals by 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So that was a big surprise. The second two Giving Days were much more predictable. You reach a maturation rate with these events, so the growth in subsequent years is much smaller. But we really didn't know what to expect, so we were pleasantly surprised. And then was trying to keep up with all the momentum as all these gifts were coming.
Zoe, what did things look like at Worcester?
Yes, so our first Giving Woo Day, our dollar goal was based off of our average financial aid package at Worcester. So it was about $32,000. And in terms of donors, we just said 150. That seems like a reasonable amount for one day. Obviously, it would be a higher volume than what we were used to. And we met that goal and exceeded that goal. So the following year, we increased it. We actually doubled it. So about 64,000, which would be the two average financial aid packages, and again, 350 donors, which was a little bit higher for us. So this past year, we decided, a lot of our alumni are very much behind this, and we went for 75,000 from 350 donors, and we absolutely surpassed it, and we were really surprised by the number of people who were on board.
I'm feeling you when you talk about the difficulty with setting your goals the first time out. Our first time out, we thought a little bit about putting a stake in the ground and saying, okay, we want to be competitive with, Columbia for the sake of argument, and then decided, well, that's a double-edged sword, right? And that if you surpass your goal, then it's champagne and happiness all around. But if you don't, then you've got some splaining to do. So our first time out, we took what I guess you could perhaps portray as a coward's way out, or perhaps more of a pragmatic approach, and we simply said we want this to be the largest one-day giving episode in Cornell's history, both in terms of number of gifts and dollars raised online, and we left it at that, and that actually worked well. And then you both pointed to the fact that your second year, once you have some benchmarks in place, it's easier to articulate your goals against those benchmarks. Mirko, in your experience working with a range of clients, are there any commonalities you see in terms of how people are thinking about establishing goals and rolling out this concept of their communities?
So I think it varies by every institution does it a little bit differently. Obviously, there's usually a donor and a dollar goal, right? Some institutions focus primarily just on that donor number. Some choose to focus primarily on the dollars. I think what tends to work is either a combination or the donor focus. From what I've seen, I really like what you said, though, Andrew, about the first year goal and having it be your most successful giving day, because I think one of the challenges that schools face who haven't done one before is their presidents are now seeing media coverage of all of these hugely, tremendously successful giving days and have these expectations that it's going to raise a ton of money for that institution. And so I've seen development offices struggle with bringing the goal down to a level that they're comfortable with. So I like the concept of, for year one, focusing on the largest single day of giving at whatever the institution is. And like everybody said, in year 2 and 3, you then have benchmarks. You know how this plays with your constituency, because we all know every school, every constituency is a little bit different and doesn't always respond the same way to everything.
In terms of thinking about setting a dollar goal, it feels to me like part of what may feel like a plausible goal or an attainable goal for you may have to do a little bit with how much you decide to bring some of your major gift or principal gift colleagues into the conversation about using Giving Day as a pretext for giving. Do any of you have any comments to share on that front?
Yeah.
That changes your goal setting?
Yeah, so this is Bill, and we have a group called our Chair Circle, which is our $10,000 plus donor group. And we actually sent a lead letter from our chair of the board about 2.5 months prior to Giving Day these last couple of years. And the idea was to get them to pledge their support ahead of time towards Giving Day in order to build those challenge dollars. So it's like a front-end, back-end sort of thing. So on the front end, we wanted to build those dollars and get at least half, maybe 2/3 of them pledged. It would make it much easier to forecast the dollar bill. On the back end would be the participation piece. So these leadership donors, that main challenge was helping drive that donor number.
Zoe or Mirko, do you have anything to add to that?
I would say for Worcester, we used our major gift officers more to look at potential donors that would want to be a match. So yes, it was if they wanted to have a conversation with one of their donors about participating, that was great, and they were giving at a leadership level. But for us, we really use those for those initial conversations when we were planning and looking for someone to put forward that $25,000.
Great.
And I think the match is what's important in these challenges. I think we've seen for institutions that have a challenge match, they tend to get a better response, or constituents are more excited about that. It gives them another reason to post on social media. It's another message that you can incorporate. So I think of approaching major gift prospects or donors, getting that challenge match is a key element.
Great. While we're still talking about success metrics, this is a question for any of you. Have you established any other sort of secondary or subsidiary success metrics that have to do either with particular populations or particular types of donors, or things like marketing statistics? I'm thinking things here like I know next year, as we're beginning to think about our next Giving Day, we're thinking very specifically about young alumni and international donors, and setting goals for numbers of donors who meet that particular category. Have any of you had experience setting that type of secondary goal?
We had one secondary goal. That was our Long Walk Leadership Giving Society. So we wanted to secure a certain number of leadership donors during the Giving Day effort. So we set a goal of 225 for that for this year. One of the other things that we tracked was how many hits we had on our Facebook page for our videos, and we had faculty videos last year, 4 of them, and it was absolutely amazing the number of hits that we got on each of those videos. I believe one of the videos had 7,000 hits, and aggregately we had over 14,000 for the 4 videos, which was really amazing. Lots of positive comments as well.
Mirko or Zoe?
Yeah, at Worcester, we didn't necessarily have any secondary goals, but we did see a great number of faculty and staff give. We had over 120 faculty and staff give, which our Giving Tuesday previous to that, we had only had 15. So we saw that as a significant increase. We also are trying to track young alumni and make their communication a little bit more personal leading up to the Giving Day, but that's something that we'll want to focus on more in the future as well.
So could you talk about March Madness a little bit, because that was a focus on recent alumni, and I think that ties in well here. Otherwise, I was going to steal your thunder, but I didn't think that was quite right.
So at Worcester, we have a giving challenge in March that is specifically targeted at our young alumni population, and that is 15 years out. And we used a March Madness style bracket this year where we put 4 classes up against each other, and they advanced throughout the few days depending on how many donors. And it was completely donor-based. It was not dollar-based, but it's a great way to get our young alumni really excited and kind of have that class unity. So although we do get about 75 to 100 young alumni to donate during Giving Tuesday, March is really the time that we focus on that population.
So Zoe, I think you're making 2 important points that I want to just draw out here to make them explicit. The first of which is that, well, I think when people think about Giving Days, the conventional sense is that this is some sort of a full-court press endeavor that's going to target the entire alumni body and happen all at once. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. You can actually segment out different chunks of Giving Day type campaigns and aim them at particular audiences, and I think that in order to fully appreciate the flexibility of this concept, it's important to recognize that. There's also the issue of aligning your campaigns with other things that may already be happening. And actually, could you just give us a little bit more detail on this? There's one element of this that's lined up with Giving Tuesday and one element that's lined up with March Madness, taking advantage of the fact that that's happening anyway in March. Were you very deliberately thinking about leveraging these sort of external triggers?
So in March at the College of Worcester, every senior has to complete an independent study project, and it is due the last Monday in the month of March. And it's something that we celebrate as students, but we also celebrate as alumni. And we actually really capitalize on this in our alumni relations, having happy hours all over the country on this special day. So it's something that is on the forefront of our young alumni's minds during the month of March. So it was really a great time to play off of that. And I can't take credit for when we started the challenge. My predecessor was the one who decided that we should capitalize on this, but we've kept it going and had to change it as our young alumni have needed different things. And it used to be a 1-month challenge, and we've brought it down to a day and then extended it to a week. So we're always changing different things to figure out what works best for our constituents.
Bill, how did you determine the timing for your campaign?
So our giving day is in April, and we actually, it's a giving month more or less, so all gifts in the month of April count. Then it culminates with the giving day towards the end of April, and we've been aligning that with the last day of classes, and we have a headquarters on campus, and you know, a big lunchtime affair where the faculty and students and the president combines sign thank you notes, but we find on the last day of classes that everybody's in a great mood. So it really makes for a great day. You get lots of great pictures and people smiling and happy because it's the last day of classes.
Mirko, do you have any insight into issues of timing?
Yeah, so I think there's one example that comes to mind from Miami University of Ohio. They actually did a Giving Day a couple of years now. That's in August, so it's tied to when students arrive. Arrive back on campus. Which, when you think about it from the annual fund mindset, we don't think about raising a lot of money in August because fiscal year just ended 2 months ago or less than 2 months ago, right? So that's sort of the quiet time. But Miami University of Ohio has seen tremendous success doing that. So it sort of flips the concept of giving days and when you want to put them in terms of the calendar year a bit on its head. So I just encourage other institutions to think about what is relevant for their campus. And that's another thing. So a couple of people have touched on it already, but I think tying it to something on campus, there's a benefit. So Zoe, they have IS Monday, but I've seen other schools sort of create campus events around their founder's birthday, which was never touched on before they did a day of giving. But that causes it to resonate with their campus population and with their alumni population, and it creates that tie to the school. So there may be some traditional existing campus events that you can build off of, but there may be some other things that you can create or use for the purposes of a day of giving.
I think that's a really important point, and it really hits home because one of the points of criticism that we've received at Cornell about our day of giving is that it feels like it's made up, because I don't think we've done as good a job as we ought to do at actually anchoring this in some sort of an actual tradition or a manufactured tradition. So that's definitely something that is on our radar as we begin planning for next year. So let's pivot now and focus more explicitly on the issue of marketing a giving day. There seem to be two schools of thought to how far in advance you actually want to push a save the date out there. One school of thought that says, well, of course, you need to let people know this is coming as far in advance as possible. And then another one that says that if you go too far in advance, you may hurt yourself in terms of the giving because people then may save their gift for the giving day that they know is coming up 4 months down the road. Bill, could we start with you? What's your stance on that?
Yeah, so we send out a mailer right prior to April 1st, which is when we start counting gifts towards Giving Day. But you will notice that there's an ebb of giving. As people get more and more used to this day, we've seen less people donate in March because they know Giving Day is coming. So we'll send a mailer out right in the beginning of end of March, and then we'll send another mailer out in mid-April as well. It's closer to Giving Day.
Zoe, how did you all work the timing?
For our Giving Tuesday event, we only send an email about 2 weeks in advance. So we try to make sure that it doesn't conflict with Thanksgiving at all, that it gives them enough time that they know it's upcoming, but not too much time to forget about it. With our Young Alumni March Gladness Giving Challenge, we actually send them, it's a postcard about a month and a half in advance, and it's a very small save the date that happens to be on an event postcard. So it's kind of a teaser, but it's not giving away too much information until similar timeline about 2 weeks out. We'll send them the initial email communication that alludes to more of the details about the event.
And I would assume that as you're thinking about the timing, if you're involving social media volunteers, for instance, you need to have sort of a phased rollout in which you let your inner circle know that this is happening far enough in advance that they can get themselves organized. If you're dealing with other groups of volunteers, that they can get their business done, getting their ducks in a row. Is that the case?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Marco, how does this look from your vantage point?
So I think similar. I'm a fan of not giving too much previous notice, so I like the 2 to 3 week period before, because I think otherwise it does detract from other things going on. But again, just the social media ambassadors are key. So for that, a lot of the schools that I work with are looking at almost an 8 week prior recruitment cycle / information, etc. So they can even start spreading the word quietly, and then a more of a full court press that 2 to 3 week before giving day period.
Thank you. I want to throw 2 additional variables on the table here. One of which has to do with just how much volume you're planning to push out during the build-up period. In our case, we actually go pretty hard. It's sort of like drinking from a fire hose, to the point that from year 1 to year 2 we had to back off because we got feedback that was too much year 1. But so even in year 1, we were thinking this is going to be so intense that we don't think the audience will be able to handle this intensity for more than about 2 weeks. And I was glad that we had thought to think about that, because otherwise the feedback could have been even worse. The other variable probably has to do a little bit with the complexity of some of your challenge structure, and this is a topic I'd like to move to next. So this past year, one of our challenges was a class challenge, in which we were asking class volunteers to reach out to their classes on behalf of the Giving Day Initiative, but through their channels, in their voice, as opposed to simply slapping a Giving Day logo on something we were sending out and asking them to send it on our behalf. And we have a total of maybe 75 active alumni classes at this point. And the groundwork necessary to, first of all, let all of the volunteers know that this is happening, and then secondly, working with the class affairs engagement officers to get all of this process in motion through all the appropriate channels with all the right people being in the loop. And then it got extra complicated because you've got your annual giving volunteers and you've got your general class volunteers. That took a lot of time, and we probably started talking about that 3 to 4 months out, as opposed to 2 weeks out, even though nothing was actually being sent until the 2 week window opened up. So depending on how you frame this all out, your marketing period may happen in phases, and it may actually need to start up far earlier than in the immediate period right before a campaign. So let's pivot a little bit. We've alluded to this in passing, the structure of the Giving Day itself. We've heard mention of challenges. I think gamification, competition, that's generally perceived to be a core part of what makes the Giving Day a Giving Day. Let's start with you this time, Mirko. What sorts of things are you seeing out there in terms of approaches to gamification and competition that really seem to be delivering results?
So schools try any number of things. It really depends on what your key audience is, and we've touched on that already. But so if you have sub goals that are class decade focused, then or class year focused, that's probably some kind of challenge that you want to incorporate there, or a young alumni challenge. I've seen some schools do student activity oriented challenges where the 5 top student clubs that raise the most dollars or donors get additional funding for being in the top 5, which is a really cool way to get students involved. Similar approach to different campuses if you're a school with multiple campuses. So, I mean, I think it can go from one overarching goal to a number of hourly different challenges throughout the day. And again, it touches on how complex you want your giving day to be. A couple of cool hourly challenges were things like most gifts from international alumni in the middle of the night, right? That's when a lot of that group would be giving. So it's a great way to incentivize them or encourage them and those types of things.
Bill, how did the competition work for your giving day?
Well, we've kept it pretty simple. It's pretty much been dollars, donors, and again, our leadership giving. One of the things we did do is we did something called a Trinity Night, which was the day before the giving day, and we held regional events around the world. Really, we had an event in London, New York, Boston, San Francisco, Los Angeles, etc. And we found alumni responded really well to that. There was a lot of logistics in getting it going. And then we had a regional scoreboard, if you will, on the Giving Day site, which I'm not sure how much uptake that had, but certainly the events, in New York we had over 100 people at the event. A lot of them made their donations then, so it was a great way to kick off the Giving Day. So that's something to think about, maybe involving your regional clubs and getting them excited about the Giving Day and giving them something to kick off, sort of similar to what Zoe was talking about for the March Madness.
It feels like that, too, would be an element that would require a lot more advanced planning.
Oh, it sure did. We were working with our National Alumni Association in the fall, sort of queuing all them up, finding the hosts and sending out the swag boxes and all the things that you do to make something like this very exciting for alumni and parents.
Zoe, how did the competition work with your instances?
So for Giving Tuesday, for us, we had a matching gift, and we actually ended up having a second matching gift after we reached our first goal at 4 p.m., which was great. But for us, it was all populations, parents, alumni from different generations coming together as one that I think was something that was really successful for us, is that as a whole community, faculty and staff, students as well, we were able to reach these goals and unlock these matching gifts. I think that type of competition was really effective for us. In terms of our Young Alumni Challenge, it really is just this affinity to class years that, we have some really strong class years that will go above and beyond and contact all of their classmates. So it was exciting to see which class years were really excited and making those contacts that were necessary, and even class years that we've never seen have that many donors. My class, for example, 2014, we had over 80 donors, and normally we have about 30. So it was really exciting.
That sounds really good. Here's a general question for the three of you. Do you think that there comes a point at which you can add so much complexity to a giving day in terms of competitions and leaderboards and challenges that you actually start to have diminishing returns, where people get paralyzed by just the sheer amount of things that are going on?
So I'm not so sure about the diminishing returns aspect. I just think in terms of what your team and your staff can handle, it can become completely overwhelming if you go too far. I mean, donors, if they want to give, they'll find a reason to give, and it might be that one additional challenge that you added that draws in additional donors. But my concern is more for the team that's handling the day of giving and just trying to keep track of everything, and you don't want to overwhelm the team and potentially overwhelm the audience. But again, I think it's more about the internal teams.
Bill or Zoe? Bill, it sounds like you're making a deliberate decision not to get too complicated.
Yeah, we've kept the footprint pretty much simple for the 3 years. So we focused on the storytelling. We did do some themed hours one year, so they weren't challenges, but we talked about, so for this year we're going to talk about our study abroad program and feature content around that. So it was more content driven than it was challenge driven. Sort of the challenge is hitting that overall giving day goal. And we do have the larger challenge that's helping drive it. So we really haven't delved into the smaller challenges as much. We did have a Young Alumni Challenge in the fall, our Giving Days in April, in which we did do a class-based challenge. So we felt like doing the class-based challenge during Giving Day this year might be a little overkill for that.
Yeah, especially if the volunteers feel like they've already stepped up once, and why are you doing this again so soon?
Yes.
And Zoe, I guess that's another example of how there can be wisdom in pulling out a particular segment and working with them, because that way you can actually have a very clear challenge structure that's specifically aimed at that population and you're not trying to keep too many balls in the air at once.
Exactly. I would just advise that you keep your messaging relatively simple, and that when you're communicating to your constituents, that it's pretty straightforward what you want them to do, what their action is. And sometimes when you add a number of different challenges, if you can't necessarily segment them out for a certain population, it does get a little complicated. So we've erred on the side of just trying to go with one message.
That's great. That's an awesome transitional point to our next topic to address, the whole issue of messaging. Could you tell us a little bit about how you crafted that message and what the call to action was when you sent it on out?
Yeah, so last year, like I said, our dollar goal was based off of 2 average financial aid packages, and we actually selected our donor goal based on the dollar goal divided by the donor goal being a reasonable suggested ask amount. So our suggested ask amount was $132.50. So that kind of helped with our messaging that a lot of the Worcester Fund goes back to financial aid and scholarships, and these are what would be equivalent to 2 average financial aid packages, and by giving your suggested ask, if it's you and 349 other donors, that will reach that goal. So we really used that a lot. This year with the match, the $25,000 match, we just tried to play that up, and that you could unlock it if we had a certain number of dollars in donors. And for specific segments, if it was a young alumni segment, we really played up that, you know, we still need these donors. Even though your dollars may not necessarily add up as fast as $75,000, you're still an important part of this challenge.
What I really like about the way you're describing this is that sort of baked into the core concept of the messaging itself, you're already alluding to the impact because you're framing this in terms of the student experience and access. So that sounds really great. Bill, how about you? How did you go about devising the messaging and then crafting a call to action?
Well, again, we focused on macro themes. So the first year we focused on students, and we had videos of students in various walks of life talking about their experience, and trying to provide those examples of the impact of your gift. And the following year we did the faculty and teaching and learning. We had 4 faculty videos, 1 from each of our 4 academic divisions. So we picked faculty members that had been at the college for 15 or 20 years. So a lot of alumni recognized these faculty, and we got just a tremendous amount of comments on Facebook and social media about these faculty members. Oh, I remember so-and-so and all that sort of stuff. And wow, he's still there. And I had him. He was great. All that sort of stuff. So really focused on that.
Mirko, are you seeing any particular types of messages or calls to action succeeding consistently across multiple institutions?
I think pretty much across the board it's about the impact, right? The difference that giving can make, and usually tied to students. In some cases, to Bill's point, more on the faculty side or whatever the other topic is, but usually it's about making a difference to students. Would be, if I had to pick one overarching theme, that would be it. Yeah, the other thing is with some of the subgroups, you can target messaging, right? So they have a little bit different messaging, but you have to make sure that your overarching messaging stays consistent. This is why you're giving, and oh, by the way, you can also support this organization, but overall your dollars will go to this. One of the things that I do see a lot of schools doing is pushing designations on days of giving, and if you look at all the literature on giving, a lot of the non-donors don't give because they feel like their money goes into the large, vast bucket of annual fund dollars that don't mean anything, right? So when you start incorporating some designations for student groups or whatever else it may be, that can also help to inform younger donors or non-donors that designations are an option. So that's another thing that institutions might want to consider throwing into their day of giving, and I think that'll help down the road with donors as well.
I'm really glad you raised the point of student groups. One of the things that took us by surprise our first time out was seeing student groups basically piggyback on the fact that a day of giving was taking place, and they created their own campaigns and their own messaging that we actually had nothing to do with, but some of it was actually really nicely done, and it spoke more directly to those audiences than we ever would have been able to. Bill or Zoe, did you encounter any of that when you launched?
We had about 30 students sign up. These are underclass students, not part of our senior class gift. and they were very active on Giving Day and driving a lot of student gifts. And on social media, we use a program called the Social Coaster, which tracks activity in terms of pushing the messaging out. And our students have performed very well in pushing out social media on behalf of the college to all their groups. So we've really seen a robust outpouring from our student body.
Yes, I would say at Worcester we utilized both our senior class committee and our phone-a-thon callers to again be active on social media. Actually, a few of them were highlighted in our videos, our teaser video and our launch video that went out for the challenge. So that was a great way to get them involved. But for our students, at least last year, we used it a lot more as an educational piece. Yes, we certainly had gifts come in, but it was still an opportunity to really get in front of them and say, this is what the Worcester Fund is, this is what it does, and we hope that when someone approaches you again in the future that you have a better understanding of it.
That makes total sense. So thus far in this conversation, we've been focused a lot on the structure of a giving day, getting ready for a giving day. Let's shift gears now and talk about surviving a giving day itself. And I don't know, once you're dealing with staying up for 30 hours, it does feel a bit like survival from a certain point in the early hours. Zoe, let's start with you. What advice would you give to people who are doing a giving day and they now need to think about the actual day of? What are the important considerations?
Yeah, I would make sure that you tap into all parts of your department, even outside of the annual fund. We actually recruited volunteers within the rest of development and alumni relations to help with personalized thank you messages, to go out around campus and talk to faculty, staff, and students, really anything that we thought we couldn't do because we need to be in front of our computers or monitoring the progress of the challenge. And people were extremely open to it, and I think they were excited to actually be a part of it because even though we had been doing all the planning, they were still able to go out and help us implement it. So I would absolutely reach out to as many people in your department as you can and try and get people to volunteer.
Bill, how did this work at Trinity?
Well, we had 2 or 3 person groups for each thing that we were doing. So, for instance, we had a campus fair around noontime this year, and we had 3 or 4 people working on that. You really need to have all those teams set up in advance, to really execute everything. Because when that day hits, it's very hard to keep track of everything that's going on. One thing I did want to mention, though, in terms of keeping your gift staff engaged, is to have some sort of internal competition or challenge within the development office. We did something this year called the Giving Day Cup, which I actually have one right here. My team did not win. We divided up into teams, and just how many donors you each secured as a team aggregately, and it really creates a great dynamic among the fundraisers, to bring those gifts in and do their job and feel like they're fully engaged during the giving day. So we had a great participation from our major gift staff and everyone on the annual fund in that regard.
Mirko, what are you seeing in terms of day of priorities?
So I think it's key that as many people in the division are involved as possible, and there may even be opportunity to involve some people who are outside of the division. So for example, if you have a group of faculty and staff volunteers who help get faculty staff giving up during the rest of the year, maybe that's a group that will participate in getting the word out that day. So then it's not your team that has to go around campus and do that. We talked about involving students earlier as ambassadors. I think that's a key element as well. I think the other important thing is to try to, as clearly as possible, define some of the key roles in terms of what specific people in the department are going to be doing that day, so that the whole department understands and knows who to go to for certain things. Because I think in the craziness of a day of giving, that can just ease stress on everybody to know, okay, this person is who I go to if I have a phone gift. This person is who I go to for XYZ. I don't bother the key day of giving person with those types of details because they're focused on something else. So I think the more you can communicate that ahead of the day, the easier it'll be on everybody and the more successful.
And I think it's also one of the most valuable pieces of advice that Columbia gave us when we were getting ready for our first one is not only that you need to define who's filling the key roles, but also have all of them in the same place at the same time so that if something happens, they can actually sort things out on the fly in real time and get people an answer. And that was completely invaluable our first time out. We had a couple of unrelated PR bumps out there in the social space that led over into Giving Day that we were able to handle. But without having all of those people there in Giving Day HQ, that would have been much more complex. One of the roles that I want to particularly highlight as being important is one person whose word is the final say if a gift comes up that's a little bit ambiguous. So, for instance, a gift officer comes in, they say, I've got this person on the phone. He or she swears that there is a check for $25,000 that is going to be in the mail. Does this count or not? It's actually an important question, right? Because if you've got some sort of competition going on where different colleges or units are getting allocated part of their bonus money based on number of dollars they raise or percentage of the total, that actually matters. And to have somebody who is where the buck stops and they say yay or nay, I think that helps everybody knowing that you've thought of this in advance and nobody's gaming the system in a way that gives them an unfair advantage. One final point, and I cannot underscore the importance of this enough, this was graven in my soul because of the headache that it caused. If you are getting t-shirts with the Giving Day logo on it for one person on your staff, get them for everybody. Because if you don't get them for everybody, you're going to be hearing about it for a year, literally. And it's also, it's just a missed opportunity. I think one of the things that we've certainly found to be amazing about going through this experience, and I'd actually love to get your takes on this next, is a Giving Day forces your organization to work together in a way that you don't normally work together, just because it does involve so many different people around the organization. And I think once you've had that experience collectively, you know, there are lots of other things you can do because you've now had that experience working together. And that's why it's so important to make everybody feel like they have been an important part of this process, as opposed to having it feel like, you know, there's sort of the core group of folks who really made it happen and then kind of the helpers on the side. Trust me on that one. If there's one thing you take away from this show, get t-shirts for everyone. So, taking back to that very question, Bill and Zoe, especially since you're speaking from personal and recent experience here at single institutions, how has going through a Giving Day impacted your organization's ability to tackle other complex, large-scale projects like this? Or am I overreading the potential impact into things here?
Well, I do think it provides an opportunity that we wouldn't have otherwise in terms of working with all these various departments, and you know, really the spotlight's on you for this day or however long it is, and you know, you really have an opportunity to get that message out there, not only to your external constituents, but also your internal constituents. And you know, I've just found that you know, those partnerships have just become stronger in terms of, you know, working with various individuals around campus in dealing with a Giving Day, and it's just an opportunity that you probably won't get, at least as comprehensively, with anything else.
Yeah, I would agree with Bill on that, that really those campus partnerships that you establish throughout this day, I think they really help you throughout the rest of the year. I would also say that it's kind of helped me put more trust in my colleagues on certain things and different project management type things, especially when it comes to any of our direct mail pieces or how we collaborate together. I think that it really does bring a team together. And it's just an exciting day to really see that all of your hard work for the past 2 months, 4 months, however long you've been planning, you can really see the impact of your work that one day. And for us, it really propels us into the end of the calendar year.
Mirko, how about you? Are you seeing similar dynamics in the institutions that you're working with?
To a point, it's harder for me to say because I'm not necessarily involved for the fact that it's more comments that I hear. But absolutely, as Zoe pointed out about the relationship with campus partners and so forth, I think the other key thing to celebrate. So I, for instance, will sort of forget to do that with their internal team and to involve everybody in who was in any way, shape, or form involved in the day.
That's actually the next topic I was hoping to tackle. You make it to midnight on day of, you pop the champagne, you flip the switch on the website. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of both the celebration but then stewardship for donors? Let's stay with you, Mirko, please.
Okay. So celebration absolutely is on is an element. You want to celebrate right away, but then you also plan a celebration. So maybe it's 2 weeks later, once you've had and again, recognize everyone who is involved in any way, shape, or form. So that's the internal celebration. I think on the other hand, there's the external aspect which you want to communicate the success of the day as soon as possible. Regardless of whether we reach your goal or not, you need to get a message out to your constituents who are following what was happening that day as quickly as possible. And then obviously there's the whole stewardship element of thanking your donors who participated, and then thinking about already prepping them in a way for future days of giving. And potentially following up with that subset of donors on a semi-regular basis after that day of giving.
Bill or Zoe, do you want to tackle that one? Stewardship and celebration.
So for us, for stewardship at Worcester, the automatic email confirmation of their gift, and then we actually have a member of our staff who sends a personal email from their Outlook account within the hour or two of making that gift, with action items, actually. So it says, thanks so much for your gift. We hope now that you'll share this message and ask your peers as well. So that's another way that we're kind of pushing out our messaging, but also getting that personalized touch. And then we make an announcement the next day with a thank you, and any donor that's giving at a certain level, or if they're an on-campus donor, we actually sent them a handwritten postcard as a follow-up as well.
Nice.
We use the entire event as stewardship. So if someone has given up in prior to April, we send the materials out to them, tell them we realize you're a donor, but we just want you to be aware of this and see your gift in action and all the examples that we're going to provide. So it's really nice for those who've already donated to kind of see and if they want to participate in the Giving Day. And then in terms of thank you notes, at our midday event on campus, that the president attends, we have faculty and students sign thank you notes. So we'll collect several hundred of those, and they use a Sharpie, and then we copy the best ones, and the mail house can do a really great job of making it look like it's an original, and then we send those out to everyone who donated on Giving Day, stocks. So it's really a nice way to thank your donors.
Yeah, and I found that students were actually remarkably open to writing the thank you notes.
Yeah.
I was surprised in that our location on campus, we gave them a choice. It was either take a selfie and put it on Instagram or write a thank you note. And we were expecting it to be 95% selfies, 5% thank you notes. And it was actually almost exactly the opposite. I think part of that was probably misunderstanding how precious real estate is on people's Instagram accounts. But we ended up with this marvelous stack of thank you notes, which really worked out very nicely. I'm keeping an eye on the clock here. We have 5 minutes left, so I would like to give you each one last opportunity to share your wisdom with the audience. Could you tell us what's one thing that you wish you had known going into your first Giving Day that you know now? This is sort of asked with an eye towards trying to help people who are thinking about a Giving Day identify what the most fundamental things are they ought to be thinking about before they begin the process. Could we please start with you, Zoe?
Absolutely. So for us, I would say just making sure that your communication with your volunteers is really concise leading up to it, that they do have that timeline to actually plan. We provided written posts for them. We provided all the information they needed, graphics ahead of time, actually on a website that was only released to them and then released to the general public on the day of. But I would even go as far as to every few hours, if there's a certain message or a certain video that you want to share, that you actually email your volunteers and say, within the next hour, we hope that you'll post this. We saw a little bit of that. We tried it in our past Giving Day, and it looks more organic if it's coming from your volunteer base from different classes rather than just coming solely from the college and people resharing that. So I would say just make sure that your communication with your volunteers is consistent and frequent.
Makes total sense to me. How about you, Bill?
Well, one of the things to think about is that if you're going to have an online presence with the counters and all these things about Giving Day is, really having a good relationship with your vendor that you're using and making sure that those communications are happening well in advance. There's contracts, all sorts of things that you have to think about. So for instance, we use Social Toasters, we have a contract there that the Giving Day vendor for the website. There's a contract there. All those sort of behind-the-scenes things that you want to get in place to make your Giving Day a success, which in the end aren't going to necessarily drive the results, but they could hurt your results if they don't work right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mirko, you get the final word.
You stole what I was going to say, but what I would say then as the final word is go do it. If you're thinking about doing a day of giving, go for it. I think it'll be a great experience, and you know what? Just give it a shot, see what works for your institution, see what doesn't. Make sure to involve the right people at the outset and get people excited about it, and yeah, then take it on.
Take it on. The only way you'll find out if it's going to work or not is to try it. I couldn't agree more with that. And with that, we are at the end of our hour. Mirko, Bill, Zoe, thank you so much for spending this time with us and sharing your insight based on many hours of hard work, obviously. I think this is a really exciting model for higher ed to be experimenting with. I think it's the only way that makes sense to move forward. We're finally starting to see the intersection between some of these digital tools and core fundraising goals. And I just salute the three of you for the work you've done. Thanks once again for joining us. And my co-host, Kim Brown, will be back late July with another episode of Advancement Live. Thank you so much to those who have joined us live, and we'll see you next time on Higher Ed Live.